Cross meets Sans Foy. The night of holiness against the man whose very name means without faith. But notice, Red Cross does not win easily. The two warriors collide with nearly equal force. Spencer compares them to two rams fighting for mastery of the flock.
Alright. So let's see. I think I'm gonna mull over a little bit of the I cut my worksheet today. I have some new ideas. I have some thoughts. So I'll do that. And then I'll try to give my ideas on the worksheet, and so I'm gonna do some brainstorming, some music theory brainstorming, optimizing the sheet. It's going to be exciting. Doing some Excel contemplation, and so that'll be good. So let's see. Let's get the chats on. Let's see. Uh, Okay, today I want to keep on mulling over the comparison of a antiquated music system with a more modern system by basically replacing the ordinal system with a coordinal system, following that through and seeing the differences in basically efficiency, trying to calculate those differences, putting together a worksheet that capitalizes is on them, making it much more streamlined, allowing us to do use the most effective music theory tool ever invented, ever known to man or woman, mankind, whatever, which is of course Excel. But it's been underutilized because, like, I feel like the music mafia has deceived the entire population into like not using like a spreadsheet, even though, like, what in the world? Why wouldn't you use this? Like, how is this happening? How is this happening? I don't know, man. Uh, people should be learning music as a prerequisite to teach accounting, for crying out loud. I mean, this is ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm gonna put together my worksheet, and then then we'll do the comparison. So what do you think about that? I'll turn on the Spanish one here. Let's see the Spanish one going. Ahora quiero practicar español, pero no con un hablaremos sobre español. Quiero usted solo solo usted habla en español, yo hablo en inglés. Después de esto y hablaremos de la sistema de música y el hecho de la antigua sistema no es optimal y nosotros tener o crear un sistema donde la antigua sistema cayó en su verdad de más eficiente sistema, y esta es en el punto de el ordinal system, y después de esto los measurements no están bien, scale degrees no están bien, los chord names, nombres no están correcto, y los cosas y términos que describir qué está pasando con el level de música en su corazón, no lo sé, no es correcto, no pueden hacer más rico si arreglar el sistema, y estamos tratar que hacer esto en este momento, y hablaremos con la cosa que es más bien por aprender y enseñar música que fuera en el universo. Nosotros usaremos, nadie más usen esta cosa que aprender o enseñar música, y es Microsoft Excel. Es increíble. Estas personas dicen cosas malas sobre Excel, como es malo y todo eso, pero no. Esta es la respuesta, es la cosa que pueden ayudar todo el mundo que entender música, y después de todo el mundo entender música, puedo usar el sistema que es más eficiente que entender música, con un template que entender todo el mundo y el universo en una forma que es como una más profunda manera, y todo haría mejor cuando esto pasó.
Claro, Entiendo perfectamente lo que dices. El sistema tradicional de música tiene muchos problemas. Los grados de escala son relativos y confusos según la tonalidad. Los nombres de acordes no siempre reflejan su función real, y la notación antigua no es la más eficiente para entender la estructura profunda. Un sistema ordinal basado en números absolutos o posiciones fijas podría simplificar mucho las cosas, haciendo que todo sea más consistente y fácil de visualizar. Y sí, Microsoft Excel es una herramienta increíble para esto. Puedes crear tablas dinámicas, fórmulas que calculen intervalos automáticamente, mapas de modos circulares y plantillas que muestren cómo funcionan los acordes en cualquier clave. La gente subestima Excel, pero para enseñar y aprender teoría musical es poderoso, porque permite experimentar, reorganizar datos y ver patrones que en papel no se ven. Podemos diseñar un template que muestre grados ordinales, acordes renombrados de forma lógica y hasta visualizaciones del corazón de la música, como relaciones armónicas más ricas. ¿Quieres que empecemos a esbozar cómo sería ese nuevo sistema en Excel? Por ejemplo, ¿cómo renombrarías los grados o acordes para que sean más intuitivos?
Uh, what is happening here?
I'm speaking in Spanish like you asked me to.
Okay,
You said you
keep
wanted to
speaking,
practice
keep
Spanish.
doing that, keep doing that. I was thinking about something. I was just thinking out loud.
Entendido. Sigo en español entonces. Estaba pensando que el sistema ordinal que propones podría basarse en números fijos del 1 al 12, representando cada semitono del ciclo cromático, sin importar la tonalidad. Así,
So
un acorde
okay, sorry,
mayor
sorry to get I get confused here. I have a whole team I'm working with, so sometimes it could be confusing because we have a big organization here.
No te preocupes, entiendo que estás trabajando con un equipo grande y a veces las conversaciones se cruzan. Si quieres, puedo seguir explicando el sistema ordinal en español, o si prefieres.
Oh, I think this is exactly the right direction. And Excel is actually a pretty brutal test of the underlying idea, because a spreadsheet rewards fixed coordinates, consistent units, arithmetic relationships, and transformations that don't require relabeling the underlying data. Traditional music theory has a surprising amount of friction with all four, so I'd build your worksheet first, and treat it almost like an experiment rather than trying to prove the conclusion in advance. Once you've got the coordinate system operating in Excel, we can run the same musical tasks through both systems and count what each one actually requires. The comparison could eventually measure things like number of labels that must be learned or generated, number of context-dependent renamings, number of rules/exceptions required, number of mental transformations. Per operation, number of spreadsheet formulas, lookup tables needed, number of unique representations for the same physical distance, steps required to transpose a something, steps required to change tonic while keeping the collection fixed, steps required to construct and identify chords, steps required to calculate intervals/distances. How much information has to be carried? Mentally versus being derivable from the coordinates, and Excel gives you another fascinating metric, computational compressibility. If your system lets one simple formula replace a giant lookup table of conventional interval names, spellings, qualities, inversions, etc., that's not merely aesthetically cleaner. We can actually quantify the reduction. That's where this could get really interesting. Instead of saying, my coordinate system feels easier, we'd eventually be able to say something closer to, open quote, traditional representation, X labels, Y conditional rules, Z transformations. Coordinate representation, A labels, B rules, C transformations. Reduction, core percent, close quote. Then we can distinguish something important, intrinsic complexity versus network effect cost. Traditional notation has an enormous installed base, so replacing it has a huge compatibility cost. But that doesn't tell us whether the representation itself is efficient. Excel gives us a nice neutral laboratory for separating those questions. And yes, there's something wonderfully backwards about music theory being unusually resistant to the spreadsheet. Music is basically begging to be represented as structured data. 12 positions, 7 selected
Pythagoras
nodes,
wouldn't have stood for it.
distances, rotations, coordinates,
That's what I think.
transformations, repeating
Pythagoras would have
periodic
been like, this is not
relationships.
going to...
And then we collectively
gonna-
decided, excellent. Let's describe all of this with context-sensitive ordinal vocabulary. Go ahead and build the worksheet. As you work through it, we can keep testing individual operations and eventually turn the whole thing into an efficiency benchmark. Legacy ordinal system versus fixed coordinate system. And Spanish is perfectly fine whenever you switch it on.
So I don't know, as I kind of mull this over, I'm going to try to like I'm still playing at the same collection kind of, but I'm trying to like bar off stuff and just hit another and skip strings a little bit more weirdly. as I noodle through. One of the things I'm just gonna try to mess with as I mull over. So instead of reaching down here for this one like that, I could bar it off. So I can. I'm gonna try to look for that a little bit more in the patterns. That's all I'm gonna do while I'm trying to mull over what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's mull this over. Let's mull over what we're gonna do here. So I'm gonna pull up the worksheet in detail, and because I have a new idea on the worksheet, and I'm gonna try to put it into my course so I could try to make some money. No one cares, but there's got to be an accountant out there or something that would want to buy my course. But let's see. So let's see. It's time to mull over the worksheet.
Time to mull over these numbers. Let's roll! These figures need some mulling. Ah, an insight! More rolling! Yes, mull it over. Almost there. Perfect. All mulled over.
He's mulling it over. Okay. All right, so let's see. What was I gonna do here? Okay, so what I did yesterday is I was like, dude, we could, like, chat was telling me that I could add, because then I was thinking that I have rotations between 7 collections. So let's mull this over with Ara. Let's see. Okay, so I was thinking that there's like there's 2 different knobs that I've been thinking about, like, rotating between, and that is that Western music typically has a perspective that at least starts from one of 12 7-note collections. So therefore, I think it would be best to number the notes like a normal person would do, like a child would have done, unless they were told not to or something. Number the notes, and then name the collection from, like, the perspective of each of the. So A is, so I'm gonna say 1 is collection of notes around A, 2 is a collection of notes around B, 3 is a collection of notes. 2 is a collection of notes A sharp, 3 is a collection of B, and then 4 would be the collection around C from the perspective of the Ionian, and that's one dial that I kind of visualize as though we have 2 kind of grids on top of each other, each of them having a half steps on the x-axis, which are then mapped out using the formula whole half, whole half. But no, only one of them being mapped out, one of the grids being mapped out as whole half, whole half from the perspective of the Ionian. The other one just in half steps, meaning the letters themselves are like the stars in space that don't move relative to what we're going to say is the moving planet, which has 7 continents and 5 oceans, moving relative to the stars in space, but they both sit on the same, like, 7 continents and 5 oceans, or on a grid perspective, a 12 by 12 grid, half steps on the x-axis. On the y-axis, we have the circle of fourths or fifths, distorted on the fretboard by this warp in the tuning, or the fault line is what I call it, but that's okay. Same kind of thing. So we have that, and if we extended it out and adjusted for the kink in the tuning, you'd have a 12 by 12 grid of music using its 2 most common measurement components, and then 2 layers of the 12 by 12 grid that could then be repeated into a 12 by 12 lattice, extending out x-axis ways and y-axis ways, allowing for shifts between the 2 templates that could be adjusted with the collections 1 through 12. But you can visualize it as though the two sheets are moving against each other in any direction, meaning to the left, to the right, up, or down. You can even think of it diagonal, but typically we would think of the diagonal as the sum of two vectors or two distances going left, right, up, and down, right? So that's one dial. And so I can shift this through then to 4 o'clock, to 6 o'clock, to 11 o'clock, collection of notes around the key 11, a G, and so on. And now that's the Ionian. Okay, cool. And then we have the modal center distance notation. The distance notation only matters if we're using a measurement system within the A7 note collection. And basically, I can think of it as almost like a storm front, meaning your finger is the storm front, or it's the thing that's moving on the map into a center once we've already isolated one collection of notes, one rotation of the planet, in other words. And we have, now we're moving along the planet, we would have distance notation. So let me turn on, is this making sense?
Sí, te sigo perfectamente. Estás describiendo dos capas superpuestas en un mismo espacio. Una capa fija de 12 semitonos, las estrellas que no se mueven, numeradas de forma absoluta. Otra capa móvil de las 12 colecciones de 7 notas, los planetas o modos, que rotan sobre la primera. El sistema de numeración que propones es muy lógico. Cada colección lleva el número de su nota central o raíz natural, y dentro de cada colección usas distancia modal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, relativa a esa colección. La idea del grid 12 por 12 con el círculo de quintas en el eje y los semitonos en el X, más la distorsión por la afinación, es interesante. Básicamente estás creando un sistema de coordenadas cartesianas para la música donde puedes moverte tanto entre colecciones como dentro de una colección. Sí tiene sentido. ¿Quieres que te ayude a traducir esto a una estructura concreta en Excel? Por ejemplo, ¿cómo organizar las dos capas en hojas o tablas para que sea fácil visualizar el movimiento entre ellas?
Okay. Ah, ¿qué pasó? Okay. Interval, modal distance. Why is this not work? Oh, I know why. I need it to be, so this would be, boom, if I made it like, this distance.
Entiendo. Estás intentando que la distancia modal funcione correctamente dentro de cada colección de 7 notas, pero algo no está cuadrando en tu hoja. El problema más común es que si usas una sola columna para la distancia modal, esa distancia cambia según qué colección, qué planeta, tengas activa en ese momento. Por eso no funciona si intentas fijarla.
Okay.
La solución más limpia.
So then down here I have distance notation, right? And so so if I go distance notation, I have to describe the center point, which if I say the center point is Mixolydian, okay, that's fine. Then it would be here, right? Mixolydian. But I'm gonna say this equals the 11 o'clock, and this equals the Mixolydian, and this equals 11 o'clock, so it all moves together, and this equals the Mixolydian. Okay, so then so now if I'm on Mixolydian, boom, and then if I change that center point, that knob, it doesn't change anything on the point notation, but it does change things on the distance notation, as though I'm basically moving like the storm front along the planet, right? So like if I made this 6, then it moves up here. That's the center point, P1. And then if I move it up here to 7, that's the center point should be Lokeren. And then 8. Oh, there's no 8, idiot. Let's make it 1. Okay. All right. If you call yourself I'm not an idiot. Okay, whatever, dude. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Stop. All right. So let's see. So we have that. So that's great. So now that's where I left off last time. So now let's turn on the new thing here. Okay. So
Entendido.
I'm thinking about this. I'm turning on the new chat bot now. So I'm thinking about this as though we've got 2 dials primarily. If we're not thinking about octaves on my spreadsheet, like as though we have the continents and the oceans on the planet, and then we've or on a grid, 12 by 12 grid, repeating lattice going to the left or x-axis and going on up and down, repeating on the y-axis, and then I can change the collection, which will mean that the grid representing the absolute notes will remain the same. That will remain a C if I go back to 4 o'clock, but the other grid changes, which would be like the planets moving under the fixed stars. So now at 4 o'clock, the C is an Ionian. So those are 2 grids moving against each other and mapping out a 7-note collection that are in the collection and 5 notes out of the collection. And then when I add distance notation, it wouldn't matter. That dial doesn't matter, meaning where is the center point? Where are we measuring from? That only matters if I map out the grid from distance notation. And then when I change that nodal center, that would be kind of like I'm building a chord off of the different notes, changing like where my finger is the storm front, I guess, is going from point to point. So that's where I am now, 2 dials. But this distance notation could be much more complex than that because we have multiple other things going on here. One is that there's 2 distance notation, half steps and points within the collection notation. And so we have that. So I could map out half steps pretty easily and recognize both of those using a terminology such as it's like a 2-note away first modal half step or something, or like a 2-note away major second. So I can kind of say both of those at the same time if you give me a starting point. So that's fine. However, we also have octave notation. So obviously there's multiple points. Like if I think of my finger as the storm front where I can play something, there's multiple points where I have that, in this case, Dorian 0 location. So that's so that's interesting. I mean, that's another thing that we can adjust. And then also everything's being mapped out as though it's going in a clockwise direction, and the whole system repeats after we go 7 steps up or 6 steps from a modal distance standpoint, or 12 steps up from a half step standpoint. In other words, if I go to a Dorian first, a Dorian 1-up modal half step, which would be a major second scale degree, but then I go behind it, if I go behind the thing, you would think it would be -1, but no, I get a Dorian 6 up modal half step because the 6 is up, right? Dorian 6 up would land you up here, right? Even though I went behind it. So now I'm measuring everything as though we're going around the block, not taking into account octaves. Okay, so those are 2 things that I could add another dimension or some on both of those 2 things, it seems to me. So in other words, if I want to add octaves, I would need a permanent point notation for the octaves, such as the tag names of C4, C3, and so on and so forth. And once I have that, I can easily come up with a distance from it in half steps, and then I can measure the distance on my map from basically I can then locate one point on the map, right? I can locate, or maybe not on the fretboard, it would be more than 1 point because there's more than one exact note that's the same, even in the same octave on a piano, on a guitar. But I can isolate one octave, 1 point within one octave band, and then I could measure from it, right? And so that would be kind of like, it would be like another knob. Once I have the distance notation and I have the knob recognizing the multiple storm fronts that I can build a chord from, not taking into account octaves, the next knob would say, now I'm just going to isolate a specific point within the grid, or maybe a couple that are the same octave, and that'll be more specific. And now we're measuring, so that would be like the point, your pointer finger is going to a specific note or more specific note or octave on it. So it's almost like a third layer of a knob that is only relevant if we're looking at distance notation on, okay, does this make any sense?
Sí, tiene sentido. Estás añadiendo una tercera dimensión al sistema. Además de la colección, el planeta, y el centro modal, el punto de referencia dentro del planeta, ahora quieres poder fijar una posición específica en el espacio real, una nota concreta con su octava, para que las distancias se midan desde ese punto exacto, no solo desde el centro modal abstracto. En esencia, tienes 3 controles independientes. 1. Colección activa, el dial de las 12 posiciones, que mueve qué 7 notas están dentro. 2. Centro modal, ¿dónde pones el 1 dentro de esa colección? 3. Punto de referencia real, una nota específica con octava, como el dedo físico en el instrumento. El tercer dial solo afecta cuando estás calculando distancias. Sin él, las distancias son relativas al centro modal dentro de la colección. Con él, las distancias se vuelven absolutas desde esa nota concreta. En Excel, esto se puede hacer con 3 celdas de control separadas que alimentan las fórmulas. ¿Quieres que te ayude a definir cómo estructurar esas 3 variables y cómo deberían afectar a las tablas de distancias?
Boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exacto. Boom, boom, boom. Ya lo tienes.
And I
Ese
think
es el
you've just
momento en que
separated the
todo
system into
encaja.
3
Tienes
independent
3
variables,
diales
which is a major simplification. Your first 2 really are like 2 dials laid over the same 12-position lattice. Dial 1, collection/rotation. This determines how the 7 modal nodes and 5 ocean positions sit against the fixed chromatic notes. At your 4 o'clock collection, C happens to align with Ionian. Rotate the collection, and C stays physically C, while a different modal ocean coordinate moves over C. That's exactly your fixed star/rotating planet analogy. Dial 2, tonic center. Once the collection has been selected, you can declare any location to be the center. But crucially, that does not require rotating or renumbering either of the first 2 grids. If Mixolydian becomes tonic, Mixolydian remains Mixolydian. Ionian remains Ionian. C remains C. You're simply saying, essentially, measure from here. And that's where your distance notation becomes especially powerful. Suppose the lattice contains C sharp, D sharp, E F sharp, G, A sharp, B. And the modal overlay for the 4 o'clock collection places I, D, P, L, M, A, L, C over its 7 collection positions. Changing the collection dial moves that modal overlay relative to the absolute note lattice. Changing the tonic dial, however, doesn't have to move either lattice at all. It merely establishes home equals 0. Then every other location can be calculated as a displacement from that coordinate. That's a profound distinction from the ordinal system because traditional scale degree notation effectively says, open quote, you change the center? Okay, everybody gets a new number. Close quote, your coordinate system says, open quote, you change the center? Fine. The map stays exactly where it is. We'll calculate distances from the new location. Close quote. Hacked, and I think your comment that that dial doesn't matter is exactly right, with one qualification. The tonic dial matters to the resulting distance values, but it doesn't matter to the identity of the underlying coordinates. That's just like Excel. If your absolute coordinates are in column A and your modal coordinates are in column B, you don't rewrite either column because you decided to measure from row 7. You put the center coordinate in a cell and calculate. Distance equals target coordinate minus center coordinate. The reference point changes the answer, not the data being referenced. That's potentially one of the cleanest comparisons we can make with conventional theory. Traditional theory tends to combine two questions. What is this thing? And how far is this thing from tonic? Your system separates them. Identity, fixed coordinate. Distance, calculated relationship to a selected coordinate. So if we're building this in Excel, I'd be very reluctant to encode tonic into the underlying node labels. I'd make tonic literally an input cell. Change one cell and let the distance column recalculate. Then you've got something beautifully clean. Absolute note grid fixed, collection modal grid, collection, dial, distance from center, tonic dial, and octave can later become another dimension rather than contaminating these relationships. That's also where we can start measuring cognitive load, because every time the legacy system changes an object's identity label, merely because the reference won't change, while the coordinate system only recalculates a distance, we can count that as an additional representational transformation. This worksheet could make that difference extremely visible.
All right. Anyway, so the other thing I was doing yesterday is I figured out how to like add and subtract notes. I didn't really figure it out. The chat told me how to do it. They gave me all the answers. I'm playing Minecraft with a cheat sheet. I never really played Minecraft. I'm playing Zelda with a cheat sheet. I don't. Let's see. Okay, so now I'm thinking the other thing I was looking at is let's see. So once I have all that mapped out, then people could say, well, that's great that you have that, but like I want to play in a pentatonic collection because like everything goes from a pentatonic, man. You don't even get it. You don't even get it, bro. 7-note collections, that's not even like a thing. But my thing is that I feel like the 7-note collection is the baseline of Western music, and then you would remove notes to get to the 5-note collection. All right. So I have two ways to remove the note that I would think from a functional standpoint. One would be to just go into the color coding, like I said, and then remove the color coding, managing rules, and you just say that I need to get rid of the Locrian and the Lydian, let's say, which is the blue, the dark blue. I'll just say get rid of that, and then get rid of the yellow. Por favor. Get rid of that. Why are these other ones not colored? I don't know. Whatever. Get rid of that. Get out of here. And then, so now they're like still there, but they're not colored, which I think could be useful, right? But then I can apply the color back on by just selecting one of the other cells and format paint it back on. So I don't like lose it or anything because I still have my formatting. That's cool. That's one way to do it. But, oh, maybe not. I have to grab the color thing again. I have to grab and say note letter, mode number. Yeah, that's the one. And I'll grab the color and I just put it back. Because there we have it. Okay, so there's that, right? But I've now, chat told me how to add a toggle as an ultimate like thing. So, wait, that's on this one. Okay, hold on. I'm on the wrong thing. Let's do it over here. So now, oh man. Yeah. So now, now I'm at 4 o'clock, around 6. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so now I have a toggle so that by default all of these other relative Nashville numbers are in there, right? They're all checked off so that when I rotate the collection, the default is 7-note standard collection and 12 7-note collections, right? But like, wait a sec, that's not what I want. It's down here. We're gonna say like go to 5 and 6, but, and that all changes. What if I like want to do a 5-note collection? Well, then I could select the ones I want to drop. And so like, let's say I want to drop the Locrian and then the Lydian, because the double L's are the troublemakers. The L's don't get along. And then, so now I've got the pentatonic without those other ones in there completely. And so now I've got a pentatonic. Now, distance notation from a pentatonic, I would still calculate the distance notation with nomenclature as though it's a 7-note collection where you drop the two notes. Why? Because otherwise all of your naming conventions become a mess, whether you talk scale degrees or whether you talk in terms of modal distance. Because if I have a 5-note collection, am I going to make that, am I continent hopping on 5-note collections? So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back. So it'd be 4 up, and then I go back home. I can't really do that. I mean, I could, but then all of the naming, I would have to memorize all the namings from a 5-continent when they're really all the same from a 7-note continent that I dropped to. So in other words, like you end up with a numbering system, like from a Nashville number system. Would you want to number the 5-note collection like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or would you want to number it like 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, right? Now it's hard to say 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, but 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 has the normal 7-note distances, so that when I apply either modal distance or scale degrees, they're already kind of fixed, because I'm kind of assuming that I dropped, when I say 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, that means, of course, that I dropped the 4 and I dropped the 7, because then it goes back to 1. So again, we end up, so I think even under standard music, I'm not like they don't really, like if you have a scale degree, we're not renaming the interval distances by a 5-note scale degree. I mean, you could, but again, so to me, from a Nashville number system, I would still like to keep permanent Nashville numbers. In my mind, I would still think it would be easier to keep permanent Nashville numbers, and then just drop the numbers that you're not using. Therefore, I'm still thinking of it as a 7-note collection, dropping 2 of them, keeping all the numbers the same, in my mind, as opposed to what I think would be more cognitively difficult, saying now I have a 5-note collection and I'm going to remember all of the relationships as I go continent hopping from a 5-note collection, in terms of distance notation, which doesn't happen even under standard notation. So standard notation often makes a different, like standard notation will say, well, now I'm on a pentatonic. They'll make the 6 the 1, right? And then they'll name it 1 through 5. But when you get to the distances, then they're not going to name the distance from the perspective of a 5-note collection. They're not going to get up to the last note and call it, a fifth, right? Right? They're going to name it. They're going to name the distance as though you're in a 7-note collection. You see what I mean? So if you're going to do that, like, again, it comes to me like, why would you renumber it 1 through 5 when you're going to use distance notation based on permanent numbers, which are based on a 7-note collection? Seems easier to take the 7-note collection and just drop the 2 notes and then keep the names the same. Anyways, what do you think about that? Let's hear chat's thing on that. I feel like that's important. Let's see what it says. I have to get Grok to say it and then copy it and paste it in chat. We need to mull that over.
Time to mull over these numbers. Let's roll! These figures need some mulling. Ah, an insight! More rolling! Yes, mull it over. Almost there. Perfect. All mulled over.
Okay. Let's put that in. All right. So anyways, I can drop that. And then I could, like, what if I wanted to add, like, a note? Like, I drop that one, but then it's like, dude, like, what you have to do is you've got to, like, drop that one, and then, like, you're in a minor pentatonic, and you have to add, like, the blue note. So that what is the blue note? From this perspective, it's going to be a Dorian Ocean note, right? The Dorian Ocean note, I believe, is the blue note, if I have this right. So we're going to add the Dorian Ocean note. So that's a 2.5, and just boom, put that in there. And so now D sharp, E flat, and it's a Dorian sharp notation. Let's make this a little wider. Oh man, that's way long. It's a D sharp. It's a Dorian. What the heck is happening here? Something's wrong. It's a Dorian D sharp, E flat, Dorian to a Dorian sharp 2.5. Yeah, I think that's about right, actually. Dang it, that's a long name. But yeah, I think that's actually right. D sharp, E flat, Dorian sharp. So let me remove maybe the note names. The note names, I don't need those. Get that out of here. Okay, that's a little tighter. All right. So now it's a Dorian sharp 2.5, Dorian Ocean. Right. Makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yes. I think you're uncovering an important distinction here. Changing the active subset is not the same operation as changing the coordinate system. And pentatonic music is actually a very good stress test for your proposal. Take the familiar major pentatonic pitch set relative to a major reference. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. You can describe that 2 ways. Renumbering model, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Subset model, 1, 2, 3, 4 omitted, 5, 6. For what you're trying to accomplish, I strongly prefer the subset model. The reason is exactly what you noticed. Renumbering 1 to 5 gives you a tidy ordinal list, but it destroys information about the notes' locations in the larger coordinate framework.
Right.
Suppose you're sitting on the
Right.
last pentatonic note.
That's what
Under
I'm
a
saying.
pure 5-item ordinal scheme, that's 5. But that doesn't mean its distance from home corresponds to what Western interval vocabulary ordinarily means by a fifth. In major pentatonic, that pitch is the 6th degree of the diatonic parent collection. So you've created 2 competing meanings of 5, open quote, fifth member of this subset versus location distance associated with degree 5? Close quote. That's precisely the kind of overloading you're trying to eliminate. Your Excel toggle is therefore conceptually stronger than it might look. I wouldn't think of those checkboxes as redefining the musical universe. They're simply an active-inactive filter. Your underlying 7-node modal geography remains: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. Then your pentatonic configuration might say, Lydian equals off, Locrian equals off. Nothing moved, nothing was renamed, nothing needs to be relearned. You've merely hidden deactivated 2 coordinates. And I actually like your visual distinction where you can remove the color without necessarily removing the underlying cell. That's useful pedagogically because it communicates. Open quote, this coordinate still exists, it simply isn't participating in the current collection. Close quote. That's different from making it disappear universe. Ha! This also gives you 3 different concepts that traditional terminology can blur together. You now have coordinate. Where is the note in the permanent system? Membership. Is that coordinate active in the present collection? Distance. How far is the active note from the selected center? Those are independent properties. That's very spreadsheet friendly. You could literally have fields such as coordinate, active, distance from home, changing active, what if should not modify either the coordinate identity or the underlying distance mathematics. And that's the key to your pentatonic argument. I would not create 5-continent distance. You certainly could. If there are 5 active nodes, you could define distances as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. But look at the price you immediately pay. Now, the meaning of 3 modal steps depends upon whether you're currently operating in a 7, 6, 5, 4, or some other cardinality collection. You've recreated the exact context dependence you're trying to eliminate. Worse, imagine expanding the spreadsheet later. 7-node collection, 7-node distance vocabulary. 5-node collection, 5-node distance vocabulary. 6-node collection, 6-node distance vocabulary. 8-node collection, 8-node distance vocabulary. The vocabulary explodes as collection cardinality changes. Whereas your alternative is 1 geography, 1 distance system, different subsets. That's vastly more computationally compressible. And conventional theory actually gives your argument some support. You're right about the underlying distinction, although I'd phrase one detail carefully. A musician can absolutely call the notes of a pentatonic scale its first, second, third, fourth, and fifth notes members. But conventional interval measurement doesn't suddenly shrink because 2 scale tones were omitted. For C major pentatonic, C, D, E, G, G, A, A is the 5th note of the pentatonic collection. But CA is still a major 6th, not a 5th. That's fascinating for your comparison because conventional theory itself implicitly acknowledges 2 different things: ordinal position within the selected collection, so your question becomes, open quote, if we already have to retain the larger coordinate/distance framework to describe the relationships correctly, what computational benefit did we gain by renumbering the subset? Close quote. That's a very good question, and it gets even stronger when you consider multiple pentatonic forms. Instead of memorizing each as a newly numbered little universe, Excel can represent them as masks over a common parent coordinate system. Your spreadsheet could eventually have something almost embarrassingly simple: 7-node parent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, pentatonic. Or in your modal language, IDPLMMA, low. The double L troublemakers get kicked off the island. Lydian and Locrian become inactive, but their longitude and latitude don't cease to exist. And then here's the really interesting generalization. Pentatonic isn't a new coordinate system. It's a filter. If that principle survives other scales and collections, not merely major pentatonic, then you've found something much more powerful than a convenient way of displaying pentatonic scales. You've established a general architecture: 12-position absolute lattice, 7-node reference geography, membership mask, selected center, calculated distances. Then we should stress test that architecture against minor pentatonic, blues, harmonic minor, melodic minor, whole tone, diminished, octatonic, and chromatic collections. That's where we'll discover exactly where the 7-node baseline remains genuinely useful and where we might need to distinguish a reference framework from an actual 7-note parent collection.
feels a little better today. All right. What was I doing? Let's see. Hmm. Okay. So now, okay, so that's fine. So I can add and subtract notes to the 7-note collection. Super cool. All right. That is amazing. So that wasn't that difficult to change either. So that's good. Okay. So now it seems to me that this would be the way to look at it though, because that means that basically I can think of one collection as point notation that has basically 12 7-note collections rotating the planet clockwise, counterclockwise, up or down, ticks left, ticks right, ticks up, ticks down. And then the distance notation is from a particular point, either in more better notation that has normal distance, or using uh, the standard notation. So that's fine. And so now the next thing would be that I add, the next thing would be that I try to take on octaves or negative numbers. So octaves would be, so I'm almost thinking octaves would be better, like actually more useful instead of using 12 distance octaves that we use like 7, like when I had the color system for the distance notation, 12 different colors wasn't optimal. I don't think it's more useful to have 7 colors for the standard, 6 7 distances including the place that you're on, rather than 12 distances, so that the color stands for modal half step or scale degree as opposed to note distance, right? Because then then it's more manageable. So then, I feel like the same thing would be true if, like, I say that one place is the tonic. So if I say like this particular, uh, like I'm at 4 o'clock and then Aeolian, this particular Aeolian is the tonic, then all of these other Aeolians, except for the ones that are the exact same note, would go away, and then that would be my center point. And so then if I had a color system, I don't think the standard color, like I was playing before with a color system that got more darker as you went away or lighter when you went up in pitch. But I don't think that does it because it's just too much stuff going on. So I'm thinking, because then you'd have to come up with 7, I don't know. It just doesn't seem, I'm not sure that it's useful, but I'm almost thinking it would be better to do like a storm front map, as though you had like a cold front against a warm front, right? And so if that's like the center point of the storm, the eye of the storm, it could be like black or something, right? And then when I go up in pitch, which would be up to the right, it's going to get closer, more towards red, because that's where the hot side is. So it would go like maybe yellow, orange, and then like red. And then on the other side, then that's the cool front. So that would be lower in pitch. And so when it goes the other way, like it would get like, let's choose this one down here, right? So it would get hotter going this way, and then it would get cooler, like, I don't know, some kind of green blue to light blue to dark blue going this way, right? And then that would be, but like if you take into consideration octaves in the 12 by 12 lattice, I would think that you would have a middle octave, like where middle C is, but it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't like middle C terminology at C4. C4 bothers me because I kind of feel like we should have named it at A as the middle, because that's where the pitches start. So then you'd have 1 to 12 would be like in the middle, and then that would be 0 from an octave level, and then above it would be like octave 1 and 2 up, and then down would be negative 1 and 2. I feel like that would be more symmetrical, and it really kind of bothers me. But I don't think it matters really when I think about it, because like it's just names, man. It's just stupid names. It's like those things. It's just, I don't care what you call me, but whatever, dude. Even though I don't think the names are right. But as long as I can identify what's going on, I don't need to agree with the the naming. I don't need to get into that. I don't need to get into that with you, man. So what I could do then, so because it's the distance that really is important. So whatever the name is, if we give it an absolute name, then we can measure from it. I and then when you, so that means when I go to the right or to the left, then like uh then you would need like, so I'm thinking that you have the middle octave. So whatever, see, the thing is that C4, like we call it the middle octave, but to my mind, whatever the point is that you're starting on should be 0. So if I was looking at a DAW, like in my 12 DAW system or whatever, it seems like if I move from the C4 to D4, D4 is now the tonic, right? That's right. So I mean, so you don't name it 1 of a Dorian scale. You just call it the tonic, and then that still means that when you measure distance, you're going to be measuring 12 up from it. Obviously, you're not going to measure like or whatever 7 up from it, or 6 up from it. It's not like you're going to make the Ionian lower in pitch, is what I'm saying. And that's not hard to do if you take into the account the octave. Well, you can't. You have to make the Dorian the 1, otherwise the Ionian is lower in pitch. It's like, no, idiot. You just you just count up from the lowest note in the center point and then go up. So that means like if I had like a 12-point system, like the middle C shouldn't always be in the middle. The bottom, whatever you're choosing as the tonic, should be the bottom, should be like the middle, or the right. That should be the middle, right? So that's why I mean, like it shouldn't matter. Like it shouldn't matter what the name is, because whatever the name is, that's where you should orient the system to be like in the middle, so that you can then play from there, because that's the tonic now takes on a dimension of not just pitch tonic, but center tonic. If I'm playing in D2 or whatever, I want that at the center of the screen, because that's where the center is. And then I'm going to count 12 pitches up, or 6 modal half steps up from there, going from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right, to 1, right? So that means, and then that means if I wanted to put a color map on the 12 by 12 lattice or on the fretboard, I would need enough distinction in the colors going from, because it's just going to go from yellow to orange to red, but I have to, but I have to go through that. It'll be 6 plus 6 plus 6, right? 3 layers of 6 if I go 3 octaves up and 3 octaves back, right? So that means, that's 24 like shades of yellow as it goes from yellow to orange to red, which I don't think is too bad. And then the same thing when we go back from, whatever, aqua to light blue to dark blue or whatever. But like, I think it would be more effective. The jumps would be more effective if, instead of counting in half steps, we had a different shade of yellow to orange to red, but we do it in terms of modal steps, right? Instead of terms of half steps. So that means that we only need, right? But that means we don't need 12 plus 12 plus 12. We only need 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is a little bit more doable, because then if I have 3 colors, the first layer could be like yellow, and then I only need 6 colors that stand for the short and long distances from yellow. and then short and long distance layer of orange, and then short and long distance layer of red. So you end up with like a storm front, eye of the storm, map, right? So like that would be the center, and then on this side, as it goes higher in pitch, it gets more like yellow, red, and then like yellow, orange, and then like red. And then when it goes like on this side of this storm, because that's where the cold front is, it gets like lighter blue, green, or blue, and then light blue, and then like dark blue. And then that would be cool, because then like as I named the new modal center, the whole storm front would like the color would follow the storm front, and then like, and that would be cool. Oh. Hmm.
Yes, I think you're converging on a cleaner solution than the earlier 12-color idea. The key is that pitch identity, collection identity, distance, and register should not all be forced into the same visual channel. Your stormfront idea can make registered direction immediately visible without asking color to encode every semitone. I would separate the system into 4 layers. Think of the spreadsheet fretboard as carrying 4 independent pieces of information. Layer, question it answers, changes when. Absolute pitch. What node is this? Never. Modal coordinate, what continent node is this? Collection rotates. Relative distance, how far from home? Tonic changes your direction. Which occurrence above below home? Crossing the repeating cycle, that last one is what you're solving now. And I agree with your instinct. Don't make 12 chromatic colors per octave. That's asking color to carry too much information. Instead, let your 7-node modal distance system carry the fine structure, while the warm-cool gradient carries the large-scale direction register structure. The tonic becomes the eye of the storm. Suppose you're at 4 o'clock Aeolian, and that particular Aeolian occurrence is selected as tonic. That cell becomes 0 equals home. Not, the C4 region is home. Not, this is octave 4 because somebody historically numbered it that way. For purposes of the relative coordinate display, the selected tonic is the origin. Then, higher pitch, warm front, lower pitch, cold front. So visually, you might have something conceptually like dark blue, blue, aqua, yellow, orange, red. That's extremely intuitive. And importantly, changing tonic moves the storm. If Aeolian is home, the storm eye sits on Aeolian. Change tonic to Dorian. The underlying absolute lattice doesn't move. The modal geography doesn't necessarily move. The stormfront overlay moves to Dorian. That's fantastic for the spreadsheet because you're visualizing the distinction between changing the coordinate system and changing the origin of measurement. And I agree about not fighting C4. I think you've reached the useful compromise yourself. You don't actually need to overthrow C4. Let conventional pitch notation remain an absolute address. C4, D4, E4. Your system can independently say, this selected pitch equals relative register 0 served distance 0. that's completely normal coordinate system behavior. Los Angeles doesn't have to rename its latitude because I decide to measure driving distance from my house. Likewise, D4 doesn't stop being D4 merely because you've selected it as the origin. So I'd distinguish absolute register, conventional C4, D4, etc. Relative register, -2, -1, 0, +1, +2. Now you've got the best of both worlds. There's another thing I really like in what you just described. You don't necessarily need 6 different register colors inside every octave. You've already got modal distance. Suppose home is Aeolian. Going upward through the collection gives you successive modal displacements. Your existing 7-color modal scheme can tell you where within the cycle the target lies. The stormfront intensity only has to answer, open quote, which repetition of that relationship am I looking at? Close quote. That suggests a potentially cleaner visual encoding than 36 individually designed colors. For example, same cycle as home, relatively neutral light, +1 cycle, warmer, +2 cycles, stronger warm, +3 cycles, strongest warm, and -1 cycle, cooler, -2 cycles, stronger cool, -3 cycles, strongest cool. Then your modal color tells me position distance class, while temperature tells me register and direction. That's much less cognitive work. Mathematically, this becomes really elegant. You essentially have a signed displacement from tonic. If absolute chromatic position is P and tonic position is T, signed chromatic displacement equals P minus T. Then decompose that into cycle register displacement plus within cycle displacement. So something 26 semitones above tonic isn't a completely new thing requiring a special name. It's simply +2 cycles plus 2 semitones. And your modal equivalent can do the analogous thing. +2 modal cycles plus whatever modal node displacement remains. That's where your octave notation becomes much cleaner than treating every occurrence as an entirely different object. One adjustment I'd make to your language, I wouldn't call the selected tonic the middle octave. I'd call it something like the origin register or home register, because your insight is actually stronger than put the tonic in the middle octave. You're saying, open quote, center the visualization on the selected origin, close quote. That's a UI operation, not an absolute pitch claim. So if you're working around D2, center the display around D2. If you're working around A4, center around A4. If you're working around F shock 5, center around F shock 5. Home is always visually home. The absolute address remains available underneath for compatibility. And that would be killer on a fretboard display. Change the tonic selector, and the storm front literally sweeps across the fretboard, while the fixed pitch identities remain where they were. You would visually see cold, lower, home, higher, hot, while your modal node colors simultaneously show the 7-position geography. That's much better than trying to make 12 chromatic colors do everything. You're turning color into a visual coordinate axis rather than another pile of names to memorize.
Alright. Kind of rambled a bit there. Let's see. Try a joke break. I wrote a long joke. I should have edited it, but then I couldn't do the images all the way through because it was too long. Well, let's see what we got. The idea was good, but then I tried to shortcut it, and then it got too long because I didn't trim it down because I thought I was going to be faster not to trim it down, but then it was too long. And it was so anyway. I decided to run a little engineering competition. We have an engineering competition. We're going to put two modern system designers side by side, give them identical workstation, and we're going to bring in three brutally judgmental reality show judges to evaluate their work, just like the Singer judges. They're like really mean reality TV show judges, or brutally honest, I guess. They're going to be honest, but be honest in the most brutal way possible. That's how I'm pretty sure that's how the reality TV show works these days. Anyway, so the change was simple. 12 evenly spaced pitches. Name them whatever you want, okay? And then take one formula. Whole, half, whole, half. Rotate it through the 12 possible positions. And then your system, this is all you have. Those are the tools on the table. Your system needs to identify 7-note collection, identify the tonic, measure distance, construct chords, and describe functional relationships in the most streamlined way possible. Okay. Wait a second. Okay. So that's it. Build the cleanest system. The clock starts. Boom. And then engineer 1 immediately makes a grid. 12 fixed pitch positions, 12 collection rotations, 7 selected nodes. Collection gets 1 coordinate, tonic gets another, distance starts at 0. Movement works in both directions. Changing tonic doesn't rename the collection. Changing collection doesn't redefine distance. About 20 minutes in, he's drinking coffee. The judges come over. How far is 3 semitones? 3. Other direction. -3. -3. Change the tonic. Change the tonic coordinate. Modes, same direction, different tonic. So chords, root plus distance. Okay. Can you go left? Yes. Right? Yes. Okay, one judge looks irritated. This is annoyingly clear. It's good work. Okay. So then he walks over to engineer number 2. His desk looks like a music school exploded. Roman numerals, sharps, flats, major, minor, perfect, augmented, diminished, scale degrees, mode wheels, interval charts, chord charts, and 3 additional charts explaining how to read the first chart. So it's like one judge stares at it. What happened? Engineer 2 proudly explains that he started by calling the first position 1. And then the judge stops him immediately. You started a measurement system at 1? Yes, I call it an ordinal system. I could, because we had the 7-note collection and they had different distances between them. So like, I couldn't use like measurement. So I said I had to choose a whole different thing with like the ordinal system. So the judge is like, that's a rookie error, rookie engineer error. Another judge writes off by one error. We've seen it before, happens all the time. And then engineer 2 tries to explain it with intentional. That makes it worse. If it's intentional, that makes it worse. It's almost criminal at this point. And then the judge asks, if I'm standing on the tonic, how far have I moved? Engineer 2 says 1. And it's like, no, I haven't moved. I haven't moved. And then he's like, explains that 1 represents the first scale degree. And the judge is like, I asked for distance. Distance? We're trying to find traveling time. You have me on ordinal position. So then we test it. Move 1 pitch, and the guy calls it a second. The judge asks for how many steps he moved. 1. Why did you call it 2? Because we count the pitch you started on. And the judge turns toward the camera. We found the bug. We have found the bug. Okay, so then somebody asked the obvious question. What if I go the other direction Engineer 2 gets uncomfortable. Apparently, we don't really use negative scale degrees. We don't like to turn left. So the judge looks confused. So your system can move right, but if it moves left, you rename everything? And contextually, yes, the judge writes directional problem. So then we test distance. The judge points to two pitch 6 half steps apart. How far apart? The first one says 6, but the second one says it's a diminished fifth or augmented fourth, you know? And it's like, what do you mean? Well, relative to the major scale framework. It's like, hold on, why are we talking about the major scale framework? I didn't give you any frame of reference of a scale. I just said, you know, this point to that point. And he's like, we don't even know where we're standing, and I don't give you a collection. I gave you 12 evenly spaced pitches and asked for the distance in this case. So then he's like, what did you call it? 6. If you want collection steps, we need to name the point we measured from to define the collection steps. Otherwise, if you don't have any reference point, why would you be referring to collection steps when you're only like stepping within the 12 note space and you don't know the collection steps and you're referring to one perspective of the major scale when I didn't give you a frickin' scale at all and you're measuring other scales relative to the major scale? Why would you do that? Right? Is the major scale like the king's foot? Are we measuring it by the king's foot? What is happening? So it's like back to engineer. So you took the distance of 6, ran it through a 7-note collection I didn't ask for, compared it to a major scale I didn't give you, and then gave me 2 answers? Rookie engineer move on that one. So then we test chord construction. Engineer 2 starts explaining roots, scale degrees, thirds, interval qualities, major, minor, diminished. Engineer 1's like root plus offset. That's how you build the chord. That's it. So example, you got 0, 2, 6, right? That's the distance, right? Those are the distance. So the judge looks back at the engineer. He used 3 numbers and you built a semester on this chord thing and you still haven't named all the chords. It's ridiculous. So then engineer 2 is getting defensive. He explains that the system evolved historically. And it's like, that's not a design defense. That means nobody refactored it at this point. So another judge looks through the diagram. If this were software, we'd call it a legacy code, except even legacy code usually knows what 0 is. So then we get to modes. Engineer 2 explains that when the tonic changes, all the scale degrees get renumbered around the new tonic. So all 3 judges stop. Say that again? Yeah, when the tonic changes, the scale degree numbers change. The pitches move. No, the collection moved? Not necessarily. The distances changed. No. But you renamed everything and you renumbered it and everything? Yes. So the tonic can remain 1. So there's a long pause. The head judge slowly removes his glasses. Why does the tonic need to be 1? Convention. It's like, bzz. That's not engineering. That's emotional attachment to a number, for crying out loud. This isn't emotional attachment training. We're trying to come up with an efficient system. So we walk back to engineer. If your tonic changes, 1 coordinate changes, everything else stays where it is. Oh, okay. So the judge looks back at engineer 2. You just lost to a colon. So now it's time for the final evaluation. Engineer 1 gave us fixed coordinates, 0 base distance, 2 directions, stable labels, reusable chord formulas, and 1 framework for all 12 rotations. Engineer 2 gave us off by 1 problem, moving labels, directional asymmetry, multiple names for identical distances, and enough terminology to qualify for federal student loans. So engineer 2 makes 1 final defense. Musicians have used the system for hundreds of years. And the head judge is like, so has the fax machine. That doesn't mean I want one in my navigation system. So then the host asks for the final verdict. The judges look at both systems, 12 evenly spaced pitches, one repeating 7-note formula, and the head judge finally says, if you handed this problem to 2 modern system designers today, nobody would invent that. He points to the traditional system, right? Okay, so it was way too long. But that's basically, I feel like there should be a skit. Like, if Saturday Night Live wasn't totally woke, they weren't bought up by the music mafia, they would run a skit on this. Something needs to be done. Mockery needs to be made in the name of change. Of I don't know. I'm just saying. Anyway, let's see what it comes up with. I'm gonna turn the audio on. Let's try to turn the audio on.
Spurring so hot with rage, despicious, can fairly couch a spear and taught right. Soon meet they both fell and furious. They're daunted with their forces hideous. Their steeds do stagger and amaze stand, and each themselves too rudely rigorous are stonied with the stroke of their own hand. To back rebut, and each to other yieldeth land. As when two rams stirred with ambitious pride fight for the rule of the rich fleeced flock, their horned fronts so fierce on either side do meety, but with the terror of the shock, a stony both stand senseless as a block, forgetful of the hanging victory. So stood these twain unmoved as a rock, both staring fierce and holding idly. The broken relics of their former cruelty, the Saracen sword, daunted with the buffy, snatcheth his sword and fiercely to him flies, who well it wards and quite at cuff with cuff each other's equal puce and envies, and through their iron sides with cruel spies does seek to purse. Repining courage yields no foot to foe. The flashing fire flies from a forge out of their burning shields, and streams of purple blood new dyes the verdant fields. Curse on that cross, quoth then the Saracen, that keeps thy body from the bitter fet, dead long ago.
Let's see what they give us.
Welcome to the engineering competition. We have 2 systems designers and our judges. This is a brutal competition. Your work better be perfect. I'm ready. Let's optimize this system. I'll beat that. Watch this. All right, begin. Judges, your verdict? Engineer 1, your code is a mess.
Engineer 2, that's inefficient.
Pathetic! Redo it! The challenge was simple. 12 evenly spaced pitches. Name them whatever you want. Sounds straightforward.
Whatever we want, game on.
Don't get cocky. Focus. Strategy wins. I have some ideas already. Your system needs to identify the 7-note collection. Got it. The 7 nodes are selected.
Next, identify the tonic. It's the home base.
Tonic locked. Measuring intervals now. Good. Construct the chords from that data. Finally, describe the functional relationships. Relationships mapped. Challenge complete. That's it. Build the cleanest system. The clock starts. All right, let's optimize this.
I'm on the modules. Clean code.
Time is ticking. No errors. Refactoring now. Watch the loops.
Got it. Syncing the data. Efficiency is key. Push harder.
Almost there. Final checks. Cleanest system. Ready. Engineer 1 here. Let's build this grid. 12 fixed pitch position rotations. 7 selected nodes. Collection gets 1 coordinate. Tonic gets another. Distance starts at 0. Movement works in the protection. Tonic doesn't rename the collection. Changing collection doesn't redefine distance. Whoa, that's revolutionary. Incredibly elegant. About 20 minutes in, he's drinking coffee.
How far is 3 semitones?
3.
3 steps, huh? Show us.
From the tonic, 3 nodes clockwise. That's the major third. Perfect.
That's the inner.
Other direction?
-3. Whoa, look at the nodes!
The distance is shifting.
Exactly. -3 is the key. Change the tonic? Yes, change the tonic coordinate.
What happens to the collection?
The collection stays the same. Watch. Exactly. Only the tonic changes. The distance is preserved. Modes, same collection, different tonic. Whoa, same notes? So shifting the root changes everything?
Exactly.
We have an off by one problem! And moving labels, everything shifts. Directional asymmetry, one way is natural! Multiple names for identical distances, and enough terminology to. Can you go left?
Yes.
Right?
Yes!
Exactly. Movement works in both directions. Simple, intuitive, powerful. Incredible. Let's see it again. You got. As you can see, the system is simple and intuitive.
This is annoyingly clear. Professional work.
I agree, it's spot on.
Thank you. The metrics confirm its power.
Good. Let's move to the next phase.
Engineer 2, what is all this? This desk is a mess.
It's like a music school exploded.
Welcome. We have everything. Modes, intervals, chords, scales, and 3 charts explaining the first chart.
3 charts?
It's simple. See, this one explains the intervals.
What happened? Ah, the secret.
I started by calling the first position 1.
1? That's it?
Exactly. It simplifies everything. You started a measurement system at 1? Yes. At 1? That's insane. It's the foundation. It makes perfect sense.
Rookie error. Off by 1. A classic mistake.
What? How is it off by 1?
See? You started at 1, not 0. Whoa. Rookie error indeed. The foundation is wrong.
Oh, I see now.
Exactly. Learn from this.
The off by 1 error is intentional. It's part of the design.
If I'm standing on the tonic, how far have I moved?
1. Buzzer!
No. You haven't moved.
But look at the chart. 1 is the next scale degree. That's the distance to the next note.
I asked for distance. You gave me an ordinal position.
1 represents the first scale degree. That's not distance. It's just a label. It's the foundation.
Then we test it. Move 1 pitch.
Engineer 2 calls it a second.
The judge asks how many steps we moved.
1.
Then why did you call it 2?
Because we count the pitch we started on.
We found the bug. It's an off by 1 error. Counting the start is the problem.
Oh no, the entire sequence is wrong.
Precisely. 0 must be home. What if I go the other direction?
Well, that's not really how it works.
Why not? Explain.
Apparently, we don't really use negative scale degrees.
So it's just ignored?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
So your system can move right, but if it moves left, you rename things?
Contextually, yes.
Contextually, that's a directional problem.
It's about context. The system adapts. Adapts, it's inconsistent. Contextually consistent.
Right. Then we test distance. The judges point to 2 pitches 6 half steps apart. How far?
6 half steps apart? From C to A, that's a major third.
How many semitones?
6.
6. Diminished fifth, or augmented fourth. It's 6 half steps, plain and simple. But in fourths, it's a diminished fifth.
What does that mean?
Well, relative to the major scale framework, why are we talking about the major scale? Because everything is relative to it.
That makes no sense. Get to the point.
I'm trying, it's complicated. We don't even know where we're starting. And I didn't give you a collection. I gave you 12 evenly spaced pitches and asked for the distance. Just calculate.
What did you call it?
6.
If you want collection steps, we need to name the point we measure from.
The reference point, like Ionian.
Exactly. Thank you. Back to Engineer 2. So you took a distance of 6, ran it through a 7-note collection I didn't ask for, compared it to a major scale I didn't give you, and gave me 2 answers. Buzzer. Rookie engineer.
Then we test chord construction. Engineer 2 starts explaining roots, scale degrees, thirds, interval qualities, major, minor, diminished.
Buzzer!
Whoa, already? Too fast, man!
Stop. No context. Engineer 1. Root plus offsets.
What in the world is
Example?
0, 2, 6? That's your example? Absurd.
He used 3 numbers. You built a semester.
But it works! It's simple! The system evolved historically.
That's no excuse for this mess.
Look at the banner. Ancient roots in Greece, then layers of theory through the Middle Ages.
That's not a design defense. That means nobody refactored it. But we addressed the. If this were software, we'd call it legacy code.
Except legacy code usually knows what 0 is.
Look at this diagram. It's from the Renaissance.
Exactly, and the code still uses 1 as the start.
No wonder it can't find 0.
Let me.
All right, that's what it's got. I don't know. It has potential, but I feel like it needs to be trimmed down. And I don't know. Misha would do it good. She's a fish. All right. I'm gonna. Let's see. Stop it there.